Okay, I told you we may do Leviticus or Deuteronomy, but I just decided we're going to look into the book of Joel. There's some good things in Joel. It starts out a little negative, but when you look at it, I'm going to try to explain a little bit about why it's negative. It's one of the minor prophets. Uh, if you need a page number, it's going to be on page 922 if you've got my Bible. Um, it's not. It's only 3 chapters, right after the book of Hosea. Um, on that, Joel, Joel, chapter 1. We're just going to go through this and discuss different parts of it, and what do you know about prophets? What you tell me what you think of when you think of a prophet? Huh? God spoke to them. Somebody works for the Lord. A lot of times people get this misconception that prophets were always prophesying about something way in the future. Uh, there are some of that mixed, intermingled in many of them, and you'll find some of that with Joel. But primarily, God used the prophets to speak of what was about to come immediately, and even was already starting there. All right, I meant to have Caleb to pull up a map and show. You didn't? Did you pull up a map? Okay. Um, uh, Judah, area of Judah in the time of the prophets. Who was Judah? Well, he's getting us there. You know who Judah was? One of the sons of Jacob. He inherited that. The tribe of Judah inherited the area of Jerusalem. When Caleb pulls up this map, we'll look at it. Let me get Jody's pointer sticker out so you can get an idea. We was trying to kill 2 birds today, and we got most of them done. For you way over yonder, y'all have to look over here. Because I ain't going to point at both of them. This kind of give you a visual aid if I show you this and help you understand the stuff. A little bit about it is there was a period of time when it's called the divided kingdom. It was after uh, after Solomon had died, and the kingdom got divided up in what they call the northern 10 tribes and the southern tribes, the tribe of Judah. Just going to take a second. Huh? It's, but anyway, when we talk about Judah, the area, when we'll show you a little bit about it, the northern 10 tribes had been conquered by the Assyrians in 722 BC. All right. Something's key to know is this area above it. All right, here we are. This area right here in the southern end of Israel. This is pretty rocky. It's got the Dead Sea. It starts right up in here in the mountain ranges just north of Jerusalem. And this is the area, the primary Benjamin was overcome. Benjamin's tribe was right in here around Bethlehem. But Judah's there, right there. This northern 10 tribes up here had already been conquered in 722 by the Assyrians. So they were no longer a functioning government. But the southern part remained intact and still had the temple, and they survived until 586 BC. So a little over 136 years that Judah remained as its own government and governing basis after the northern tribes had been conquered. But the Babylonians would come in here and later on would conquer this area right in here, and then the Persians would defeat them and they began to regain. So this is the area where Joel would have been prophesying and teaching. And so it kind of gives you a little visual idea there of what's going on. The reason God allowed Israel to be conquered was because of their rebellion. They'd begin to walk away from God, and they began to worship other gods and allow various gods into there, intermingling. They were just corrupt, and they just basically just walked away from God. And God begins to bring about destruction. He begins to bring about patterns of pain and suffering on them. He already completed that with the northern tribes, and that's why they were basically overrun by the Assyrians under their government reign. Well, now he's in preparation. We don't know exact date when Joel wrote this. This is written sometime between 650 BC and 550. Somewhere in there is written. So we don't know if the Babylonians were about to conquer or where it was. But God's about to lay out why he's doing what he's doing to that area that's called Judah. And so I want you to understand climate change is a farce. It's a bald-faced lie by political people. God's in charge of the weather, and God's in charge of everything. We've been having droughts and famines for hundreds and hundreds of years, way before Henry Ford ever started building the first Model T, way before we was ever producing electricity or anything else. So I'm here to tell you, God's in charge of the weather, and that's exactly what was going on right here. So beginning in verse 1, God is speaking to Joel to let the area of Judah know why they're about to face what they're about to face. Now this is the neat thing, because part of what we're going to study through this book is I want you to see God's character. I don't want you to look at this in a historical sense, although it is history. I want you to see God's character coming out, because he still does the same thing today. So he sends a man who proclaims the word, and he said, the word of the Lord that came to Joel, the son of Pethuel, hear this, O elders, and listen, all inhabitants of the land. So right there in that second verse, he said, O elders. Who is he talking to? Who are the elders of Israel? The leadership. Those who were making decisions, it could be priests, it could be government, all the leaders of the heads of the family, they were under a tribal system, so the eldest male figure was always under it and the others were under him. But God's talking directly to the elders, those who are in leadership, to let them know this message is for you, first of all. In other words, God's holding them accountable, because in that leadership role, they are primarily responsible for the direction of the nation. But then he says, and then to all the inhabitants of the land, because they could have rose up to stop the elders and could have rebelled. This is where you begin to decide whether you're a sheep or a goat, or whether you're going to be a leadership. And in security deals, it's called a sheepdog, because you're not going to be pushed around. But people tend to just let somebody lead them. Do you see any of that today? People don't want to stand up for what's right. They let a few individuals come up there and spout off all this craziness. And everybody, okay, I guess I better believe that. No. And God's going to judge us. So what he's telling the nation of Judah right here, listen, I'm talking to all of you, and especially to the leaders. Has anything like this ever happened in your days or in your father's day? In other words, that's not a good sign, folks. We've been to see something worse than anybody's ever seen before. We're going to be looking at locusts coming and stuff in ways you and I have never seen, other than maybe on pictures in Africa and various things. But he said, you're going to see something worse than you've ever understood. Now, that's not a very promising thing for people. It's going to get rough. Tribulation period is going to be rough. So he goes on in verse 3. He says, you're going to tell your sons about it. You're going to let your sons tell their sons, and your sons the next generation. So for 4 generations, they're going to talk about how bad this period was. I'd say it's not going to be something easy going on. It's going to be a famine and a destruction that goes beyond anything I've ever heard of, and it's going to be remembered 4 and 5 and 6 generations down the road of God's destruction. Now, why would he do something this mean? Why would he do anything this mean? Huh? He wants to get their attention. See, this is what bothers me with people. God is very long-suffering, very patient. But folks, there is an end to that. There is a stopping place with God. And that's what people don't understand. Well, I'll just go and I'll ask for forgiveness. And I see it in the Christian community today. People living in grace and just trying God. And I thought, why? Why would you do this when God is putting things in front of you every day to say, come back to me? Because that's what he's done. All the things prior to this he's done to try to bring them back. But us being humans, sometimes the only time we'll ever come back to God is when it just gets that bad. How many of you know people right now that you know need to be saved, they need to be walking with God, and they just keep going further and further downhill? Isn't it sad? And you look at them and you think, why? Why do you destroy your life? Because sometimes that's the only way they'll go before they ever look up. Why do churches do some of this? You say, oh, churches wouldn't do that. Folks, churches are dying today because they're rejecting everything God asked them to do. When churches are not reaching out to somebody and not growing and not being on fire, and the people are just sitting there waiting for the clock to tick, they've already rejected everything God did. God is living and active and working, and he wants his people that way. There's not a break time. There's not a lunch time. There is not a retirement time when the church is supposed to quit. We're supposed to be about God's business every day. And if we're not careful, a lot of churches are going through this very judgment. He starts in verse 4. The gnawing locust has left. The swarming locust has eaten. They have left. They left, and swarming locusts have eaten. And what the swarming locusts have left, the creeping locust has eaten. And it goes on and it listing all these different ones. When do locusts begin to take over? All my farmers know. When's the primary time grasshoppers thing really are prevalent? When it's dry. So they've already been going through a drought. Because if it's raining, they'll get a fungus and it'll kill a lot of them off and stuff. So they've been going through a drought. This tells me that right off the bat and stuff. And I've never seen this, but I've seen pictures of places in Africa where it looked like a dark cloud coming at you of locusts flying. And when they leave, there's hardly anything. Well, this is wave after wave, and every one of them's coming and eating more and more to the place that they're eating the bark off of trees. Now, when I lived in Weatherford for 3 years, and I got a picture somewhere somebody gave me, there is a bull nettle bush right there. And there's no less than 40 grasshoppers eating this bull nettle. Now, what does that tell you has happened up to that point? They've eaten everything that's good. They're eating on the bull nettle. It almost looked like a little Christmas tree with grasshoppers all over it. I'm thinking, that was a bad year right there. And yet, that's nothing compared to what Joel's talking about is coming on them and has been coming. Especially in an agriculture society where everything that they eat is raised right there. There's not a Super One. There's not a Walmart. We can't ship it in from somewhere else. If there's a drought there, it's affecting that whole region that was up there, from Egypt all the way up north. There could be a little bit of food coming and going, but primarily the whole area is drought. So what do you do for food when a grasshopper sit there and eat it all up? You see, they have the early harvest where the barley and wheat comes off in May. So they've already had a dry year, so the odds are that wasn't doing very good. And by the end of the summer, which is the dry year, you got your grapes, your pomegranates, and the various fruits and vegetables. And now here comes all the locusts eating everything there. Brad, when they get through eating that grass, what's that cow going to eat? Whatever you can bring her if you had anything to bring her. So there starts going your meat, your goats, your sheep. They're starting to starve to death. So their rebellion is bringing torment on all the animal kingdom. Your deer, every kind of wildlife. Your water's drying up, so your fish are dying. We're fixing to go in there and see all this. Folks, this is a bad picture. But why did God do it? Because his people were rejecting him. So we go on verse 6, he said, "For a nation has invaded my land, mighty and without number. Its teeth are the teeth of a lion, and it has the fangs of a lioness." We don't know if this is the drought in the desert, or is this when the Babylonians are starting to come in? Because the people are at their weakest point. It'd be a great time for a king to come in and begin to take them on. But he's telling them it's fixing to get worse. And then he goes on and talks about it has made my vine a waste, my fig tree splinters. So everything's drying up and dying. It has stripped them bare, cast them away. Their branches have become white. When does a branch become white? When grasshoppers eat all the bark off of it. Begin to be so. Our figs, our pomegranates, grapes, folks, it's just being devastated right in front of them. And it doesn't take a herd of locusts very long to strip it. I mean, literally in a day or two, they can strip everything you got. And then more and more are coming, and so they're going to, and it says, wail like a virgin girded in sackcloth. Sackcloth, we don't know exactly what this is, but it's a burial cloth. It's something you would wear when you're in great mourning. It would probably be colorless and dull. I think of the old toe sacks we used to wear. The old short sacks. People used to make dresses out of them, and when I say short sacks, it's a sack of wheat shorts. A lot of people used to make dresses out of them, old flour sacks and stuff. And they'd get one. They liked the ones that was the stencils and stuff on because they gave them some flour, some prettiness on it. But sackcloth is always represents a time of mourning and wailing, a time of when you want to pour ashes on you. So you do away with your gay clothing, your good-looking stuff, and you wear stuff that's old and stuff. A lot of times they would tear it and stuff, put ashes on them. And for a young girl that's about to get married here, and that's what he's talking about here, this young girl, that instead of celebrating her marriage, she's wailing. and she's in disappointment, and she's in sadness because of everything. So literally all this is robbing them of the victory that should be theirs, in the happiness. You know when most people turn away from God? You think it's in time of trouble or time of good? When times are smooth and stuff, that's when most people say, I ain't really got time for God. I got a brand new boat out here. I got a brand new car. I think I'm gonna get on my motorcycle and do a road trip and stuff. And I ain't got time for God. I ain't got time for the church. I'm gonna try to gather up some more money. Whatever it is, there's always something to do. And yet you let some kind of tragedy happen. People start showing up. I mean, I can go back to the first Gulf War, and I can remember it was a Wednesday night when they began to attack Saddam Hussein, and I stayed home from Wednesday night service that night because to me it was, wow, we're going to war right now in '91, and focused, and the nation turned to the churches and began to pray. I mean, the next Sunday, people were doing 9/11. People praying and stuff. Just this past couple of weeks, that boy had the heart attack on, and all these the people that say you can't pray, you can't do this. What were they doing? They praying. Well, I thought you said we can't do that. You don't believe in God anyway, but you wanted to believe in God that night. So when things are going good is when people walk away from God. That's when you ought to really be praising Him. And say, I want to walk with you, God. I like this. I don't like this. Huh? Well, He did, and it did. It brought a lot of people. But the sad thing is, most of those people that were praying, they won't pray again. So God didn't answer their prayers. He answered the saints. I think that boy, God used him. I don't know his faith or everything about him, but God used him to show people power of prayer. And hopefully there'll be some get saved and people will begin to believe in it and maybe even turn the country around. But it's sad that somebody has to go through that. It's just sad that we get in that situation, but Joel's talking about all this stuff is going to rob you of your joy. It's going to rob you of your happiness. You're not going to be celebrating even a wedding and a wedding feast. You're going to wail. You're going to cry. It's going to be more like a funeral. He talks about the grain offering and the drink offering are cut off. These are some of the offerings that are being done in the temple that are required on a daily basis. Well, you go into this drought situation and you're running out of food and you're running out of animals. The priests don't have anything to offer because it's just not there. So now it's affecting worship because God says, I'm going to take all that away from you. And that's also when you begin to, well, God, it's pretty rough down here. Maybe I ought not do this. I'll just cut you a little short. Malachi said that's when you rob God. A little tough. God said, I want you to walk by faith. But all this is building up. So even the priests and the ministers and those working in the temple are suffering. They can't fulfill their duties. And there's going to bring a lot of, the true believers is going to bring a lot of disheartening to them that they can't do this. Verse 10, he said, the field is ruined, the land mourns, for the grain is ruined, the new wine dries up, fresh oil fails. Be ashamed, O farmers, wail, O vine. I know, I've been around agriculture my whole life, and I planted watermelons last year, and I plowed them up about June because it was a piddle. I've seen bigger cantaloupe than I had watermelons, and it was dry, and I raised a good crop of nut grass where my watermelon should have been, and it's pitiful. Pitiful. It's sad. Somebody said, I want to see your garden. No, you don't. No, you don't. We ain't going up there. You know, finally got a little bit, made some peas and a little bit of corn and stuff, but it's disheartening. You know, guys who work in agriculture and stuff, that's their. It's more than just providing. It's their pride and joy. They want to see those animals looking fat and sassy and over there and running and kicking. They want to see that corn. My corn was 3 inches taller than yours was. My ear of corn is better looking than yours. You know, it's a little bragging, right? But all that's gone. It's just disappointing because their whole life is being destroyed in front of them. And there's sadness right there. I think about the sadness that's in America today with the things that we face and knowing we've got political leaders doing their best to destroy our livelihood and walk away from God and are proud of it. Folks, marriage is being made, it's been made a skeptical out of where people are now. Instead of being a holy and righteous and great thing, it's either torn down or made light of by saying everybody can be married, male and female, or I mean homosexual. No. Marriage is ordained of God, and it was between a man and woman, and it will always be that way, and we need to be serious about it, and if anything gets me riled up, I'm tired of them. They stole our rainbow, a promise from God to Noah, and they want to take that and wave that around on a flag? No. But our nation is sick because we've walked away from God. And this is coming to us because God still wants to do some stuff with us. Whew. I'm going to go through 13 and I'm going to stop because I may go to getting mad. The vine dries up, the fig tree fails, the pomegranate. He's listing everything, the apple tree. It's all going away. The trees in the field dry up. Now, folks, when trees go to dying, that's a serious drought. I remember a few droughts like 2011 and times, and me being an equipment operator, I can remember times when you could dig down 6 and 8 foot and not find moisture. I've tried to push some trees over that, and you dig down just as far as you could, and you couldn't hardly move them because the dirt around them looked like concrete. And you thought, how is anything still alive? And when they go to drying up and dying, you know there's a serious drought. But look, California's been in a drought for 5 years, and now they're whining and crying because God is raising the lake levels, more rain, more snow, and everything. Well, we just don't know what to do. Well, you ought to be praising God that He's breaking that drought. There was fixing to be a serious food crisis in America because those farmers, they were going to cut their water off so them people in the city could water their yard. Now, is that not a mixed up priority? We want to water our yard and keep it green, but you farmers are just going to have to do without. Really? You ought to start using a bucket and going outside just so you don't have to flush the commode. Food, you can't survive without food, folks. You can't survive. You know, out in Dallas area right now, every house out there that's built today gets a sprinkler system around it to water the yard, and it's mandatory. And I got all over a guy up there. I said, y'all going to take our land and flood our bottoms and take our trees away so you can water your stupid yard. Well, it's a law. We got to do it. I said, what about our rights? Well, it's just where it's got to be. And when they do this boat ark, where the boat ark lake's being built up outside of Bonham right now, and they're talking about doing this on Marvin Nichols, not letting it, they don't want any recreation because we don't want to dirty up the water. We don't want to dirty up the water. We want it to come to us good and clean. So we're not going to let anybody local benefit from it. Bill? Mm-hmm. Oh, I've known him since the 80s when we was talking, a bunch of us talking one time in one of them droughts and stuff, and a guy said, I don't care if all you farmers go broke. We said, where do you get your groceries? I get my groceries from Safeway. Where do you think that come from? But, I mean, that was a guy lived in Mount Pleasant, Texas, and he's so stupid, he thought you just go to Safeway and they're producing it somewhere. And he thought it'd be all right for all of you to go broke. In Mile, they're whining and crying because eggs are $10 a dozen. I think they might be getting an idea. Randall said they've been costing him $10 a dozen for 2 years. It costing me more than that because I can't keep hens alive long enough to start laying. I'm feeding all the hawks. Either that or Randall's eating chicken and dumplings on a regular basis. But, you know, cheap food has been a blessing in America. And over the past 2 years, you can't find stuff. You remember just a couple of years ago, you couldn't find beef? That could be not very far around. Y'all keep your eyes off my deep freeze over here now. But we're blessed to live in this country because right where we live, because you can raise a garden, you can raise some cattle, we can get by. But what about these people living in the big cities? Downtown New York. Yeah. Well, don't tell them they can move anywhere else. But you see how serious it can get when God begins to remove his blessing. And that's a character of God. When he has enough and he withdraws and he pulls away, there's nothing you can do. And that's what Joel, now that's a mess. Now you're talking about a preacher that's got a tough job. I'm glad God didn't call me to be a prophet. Although some of my sermons have to be pretty negative at times too. But folks, I mean, I promise you, there were lots of folks didn't want to hear what Joel's telling them. And we read this stuff and we don't take it serious. This is not historical. This is just the way God operates. We always look back and say, well, that's the way they deserved it. Well, what do we deserve? What do we deserve? Folks, our nation, pitiful, pitiful. What really scared me is Matt and Jana was sitting up there at the rope, and I was talking to him, and I was talking about how bad it was around there, and he said, Dwayne, he said, y'all 30 years behind where we were in Colorado. He said, they got down here and they thought, man, this is paradise. People are nice. He said the first several months they were scared to death because they'd never seen this many nice people. They said something going on. People are just not this nice. He said on the police department, he said they'd run more calls in one night than we run down here in a month. I said, really, Matt? He said, y'all ever been 30 years behind? I said, well, we're going to stay there. So how bad is this now? Look at San Francisco. Oh, where do I start with San Francisco? Homelessness. We're going to legalize places to go and shoot up your heroin. It's illegal to do that, but we're going to legalize a place for you to come do your illegal drugs, and we're going to help you with that. You can go hit a woman. I saw this in New York City the other day. A woman walking down the street, and a guy pulls out a baseball bat and just cold cocks the, knocks her out on it. She had done. She walked. I saw where she walked away from this guy, got out close to the street and walked around him and came, and he walks up there and just waylays her. For what? For what? Yeah, and they were saying people in California, I think it's at 900 or something out there, they were literally going around with calculators calculating so that they didn't go over the limit. We're shopping and they're doing it. I can steal up there. And when they got to 8.99, they quit. And they're okay. Target lost $600 million last year from shoplifting. Well, who's paying that bill? Yeah. And folks, when these no counts around here see that, well, if we can do it out there, we can try it here. And I hope and pray that, well, I know it, and thankfully, I think we can use them and be all right. But Illinois is trying to outlaw every AK-47, the whole state. Well, there's more guns in Chicago. You ought to arm the honest citizens in Chicago. You ought to hand them out to them. Folks, I don't sound much. Y'all getting me started. I hope they catch the guy down at Houston that shot that guy the other day, and I hope they give him $100,000 reward. Did y'all see that? He come in there with robbing them at a restaurant or something and taking their money, and that old boy turned it back. He just pulled it out, shot him 9 times. They said, "Oh, some of him he was on the ground." Well, yeah, he was making sure he was dead. Oh, they want to indict him? I don't doubt that. Well, he ought not to come in there and take your money. And and I don't see you talking about a mixed up world. The criminal has more rights than you do. They gonna come in and take your stuff, and then they want to arrest you for shooting them or taking them out. But we this is one thing Matt told me. One of the reasons he left the police department up there, he said we were afraid to do our job because we're afraid the city council would bail on us. He said they were worried to death that if they were to get in a confrontation where they had to use a gun, that they would have been prosecuted instead of the criminal. But we want to defund the police. It's do away with them and send a social worker. No, he never got around to that. So, he never mentioned. He did say he had somebody across the pond that he wished would move off somewhere, but no. But it was, it's shocking because when we get out of our little area and we think it's bad here, folks, it's really you're in the good area. Ron, why did y'all leave up there where y'all had lived so many years? So see, when you kick God out, this is the chaos you come out with. And then why shouldn't God bring droughts and depressions and stuff on us? I'm telling you, He's trying to draw people. Last summer, I knew a lot of that drought was trying to wake up this area. And people were hopefully beginning to react to it. And then God blessed us in August with over 6 inches of rain. Folks, if He had not gave us that rain in August, it'd been rough. An inch or two wasn't going to do much back then. I was within about 3 or 4 days of having to start watering my cows because that pond was so dry. Probably should have already been putting some out, but they kept talking about it was going to rain. And God blessed us. And even though we finished it out and we were surviving, He gave us a mild winter. What if He dumped all that snow on us right now? You know, but God's trying, even as Christians, God will bless us and carry us through it. But when He gets down on a whole nation, we all go through it. And God's going to show you, and He's going to bless you and take care of you in some way. But there'll be some suffering. There'll be some pain. So Joel is showing us how God reacts when people reject God. So that's part of God's character. We need to keep that in mind. And I know a lot of times during prayer, we pray for a lot of people and a lot of sickness. Now, I'm going to say this with a general saying, because it's not always. But a lot of the problems people are going through are self-inflicted. Okay? Sometimes it's work-related. Sometimes it's our lifestyle. Sometimes it's the things we do. But there's a lot of ailments out there today that, my diabetes is not from God. It's my sweet tea addiction I had for years. Because I love sweet tea, and my wife would amen that. I could drink it a gallon a day. Wasn't a good thing for me. So now I'm on unsweet tea and trying to behave myself most of the time. Shut up, Brad. What goes around comes around. You remember that. But, you really look at our lives sometimes and we want God to heal us and cure us when He said, won't you just make an effort to come back to me? Why don't you quit doing what you're doing and quit destroying your life and come listen to me? Why don't you just do what I tell you to? Marriages, Sunday, we want our marriages to be successful. Well, let's try it God's way and see if it doesn't work out a little better. Well, I just don't agree with all that. Well, that might be part of the problem. Part of the problem in people's lives is they don't agree with some of the things God says, but He says obedience. You want some good things to happen, and try doing it God's way. And you'll be amazed at what He'll do. And that's what makes a church so great, is when people start moving forward and stuff, and then you're impacting people. And God says, I can bless you because you're being obedient. And it don't matter if you're 10 years old or 60 years old. When you start being obedient, God's going to start blessing. So there's always an opportunity for us to quit going away from God and start going with God. And that's another thing about Him. At any moment, the prodigal son, Picture of God saying, when you come to your senses, you'll come back to the Father, and He'll welcome you. But people have got to wake up and say, I'm going to go back and walk with my Father. And that's the blessing. So wherever we're at in our lives and whatever mistakes we've made, there's always an opportunity for redemption and begin to move forward. See, when I got saved in 1982, I had a lot of bad stuff behind me. But God said, that's all right. That's behind you. We went through that. Now we're going to change paths. And you walk with me, and you'll be over here. So wherever we're at, there's always that promise of God and that redemption and that beginning anew. And that's what I want to understand. Our marriages, our relationships can always be better whenever we say, okay, I'm going to go this way. This nation, I still say there's some hope for this nation. It'd take a mass revival and a great moving of God's Spirit, but that's very possible. Could happen. It's happening right here in our area right now, because I promise you, people are watching you, and they're coming, and we're getting people every Sunday. There's some new people come in here just to be around something, because they said there's just a little bit something different about this church. Well, that tells you that you're impacting the community. So we need to keep on doing what we're doing. We need to keep on loving them. We need to keep on understanding how God operates. And I'm done. Thank y'all for being patient. If I don't always sound like a preacher, remember I am flesh and blood, and I do get a little upset. But I'm also a warrior for Christ. And I want us to live and be victorious. And I wish everybody could get saved, but I'm tired of folks running over everybody and then being done with thinking that's okay. God, you attack me or anybody in here, and you'll get me riled up. And I think when a criminal dies doing something like that, he's getting what he asked for. And Leviticus and Deuteronomy's got some pretty harsh punishment, because that's the only way you stop it. A slap on the wrist don't cut it with a child, and they're not going to cut it with a criminal. Folks, they need to do some hard time. And a cop that has to shoot somebody, I promise you, he's living with something that most people never have to live with, because he just took a life. And even if he made a mistake, he had that much time to make that decision. Do I go home, or did he kill me? Is that a real gun or a toy gun? And you think about that. Somebody waves one in front of you right quick, and you got to make a split-second decision. There's some bad cops out there, but 99% of them need a little bit of grace, because they're trying to make a decision how to protect you or somebody just like you. Father, thank you for loving us and caring for us. And I just pray for this nation that there'd be a great revival, Father. I pray that the leadership that's so radical and throughout both parties and everywhere else, I pray that we can replace them with godly men and women who will stand up on principle. And I pray some truth gets out there, and that we can turn this nation around, because I don't want to see us go through what Judah went through. I hope we don't have to have a prophet like Joel stand up, but that we'll repent and come to you even now. But thank you for these books like Joel, where we can see your character and we can see how you work, and realize that we too are susceptible to some of these same things. We ask it all in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank y'all. Y'all are a great group. Mike and Ronnie did a good job, didn't he?